You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. And finally, our third sponsor is 988. The Oklahoma 988 Mental Health Lifeline. 988 is a direct 3-digit lifeline that connects you with trained behavioral health professionals that can get all Oklahomans the help that they need. Learn more by visiting 988oklahoma.com. That's 988oklahoma.com. And now, let's get into today's episode. Today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Tom McDaniel to the podcast, former Oklahoma Hall of Fame inductee, I believe it was 06, golfer, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit of golf today. But Tom, thanks so much for coming down. Excited to share some of your stories.
I'm glad to be with you.
So, we've just been chatting. You're 84 years old.
Yes.
You're still playing golf, and a few weeks ago, you had a hole-in-one.
I did. It was my 5th.
Okay.
So I've been playing. I've been playing a long time, but my golf doesn't seem to be getting better. But sometimes good luck overcomes
if you play
everything
enough,
else.
right? If you play enough, the odds are that you might get one.
Exactly.
Tell me about it. Which hole? Where are we at? What club?
I was playing at Oklahoma City Golf and Country Club, and it was number 6, which is a par 3. I, of course, admit I was playing the senior tees. I wasn't playing back where you play, but I was playing the senior tees. It was about 145 or 50 yards. So just pretty fortunate that it went in. As you know, you can hit a lot of great shots that don't go in.
Yeah. 6 is uphill. Did you see it go in?
No.
Okay.
I could see it going toward the hole, but we did not. I couldn't see it roll in the hole. It hit on the green and rolled toward the pin. And so there were some guys on the next tee that started jumping up and down and yelling at us. And so I knew then that something really great had happened.
That is awesome. And was that in your regular kind of chops group that you guys played with?
Yes, I played with some guys that are about my age. There's a retired commander from Tinker Air Force Base named Dick Burpee, a friend and neighbor named Bill Shadid, and a real estate guy named Gerald Gamble.
Okay.
And we play together on Saturday mornings.
That's awesome. What a time, right? What an experience. And I know I used to work out at Oklahoma City, and that's kind of how we met a long time ago. But it's kind of fun for you because I believe you live close to 6, right? You only live right off 1, and then you can see 6 from the back of your house.
Yes, we live along the number 1 fairway there.
What a great thing. Love it. Hole-in-ones are just special, regardless of where it is, who you are, how old you are. It's something that everyone, if you're a golfer, you want to have one, right?
I agree.
Awesome. So a lot of people know you, I think probably would be, as former president of Oklahoma City University and just a lover of education. The McDaniel family name has done a lot of things and is very kind of prominent in the city and the state. So I'm excited to share some stories today. You have 3 sons, all of them doing great things. But let's go all the way back. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Muskogee, Oklahoma.
Okay.
My parents didn't live there. They lived in a little town called Stigler, which is about 40 miles east of there. But I was born in 1938, so that was the closest hospital. So born in Muskogee, Oklahoma. My father had a small business there, which he sold when he went to the Navy during World War II. When I was a pretty small child, when he came back from the war, he went to work for the state. And so we moved around several places. I've lived in several Oklahoma cities, mainly in rural areas, until moving to Oklahoma City as an adult.
Oh, wow. So growing up then, what was, I guess, because a lot of people see you're big in education. Was education big for your family? Was mom a teacher? How do you get to be in education?
I think education became really big for my mom and dad because they neither one went to college. They both got a high school education. Although I'd like to think I'm not overly spoiled, I was an only child.
Okay.
And my parents, their generation went through the Big Depression. My father was in the Navy in World War II, as I've mentioned. My mother stayed there and tried to keep the business going. But their life experience when they were your age was pretty tough sledding. Mm-hmm. And so as long as I can remember, they said, you have got to get a college education, and you're going to have to make good grades, and you're going to have to apply yourself, because if you're going to take care of your family, you've got to have an education in the next generation. So they instilled that in me, even though they didn't have an education.
That's great. I love that. So plan then, obviously, as you're going through high school, education is a huge thing. Were you big in athletics as well in high school?
I was. By the time I went to high school, I'd gone to several different schools, but I ended up in Colgate, Oklahoma, and my story is probably kind of a unique one in a couple of ways. I'd never played football. I'd gone to rural schools and really loved to play basketball. Okay. And we moved to Colgate, and the day they were unloading the truck in the little house we were renting, a guy comes by and introduces himself and tells me that he's the football coach there, and he's got a couple of guys that live in the neighborhood that have come to help us unload the truck. And they became two lifelong friends of mine, and the coach said, I said, well, I really like basketball. And he said, well, it'll help you get acquainted and stuff if you play football. So I did. I started playing football, and turns out, while I wasn't a fantastic athlete or anything, I did have a knack for throwing the ball. So by the time I was a junior, I moved in as a freshman. By the time I was a junior, I was the quarterback, and he told me my senior year, if you have a good year and the team has a good year, I think I can get you a scholarship to play football.
Oh, wow.
And so we did have a good year, and got to the state playoffs. And so, true to his word, he got me 2 or 3 offers to play college football and basketball. So I played both football and basketball, but I wasn't a terrific athlete. I don't want to say that, because I played at a regional university at a small school. But for me, it was a great place. I wasn't sophisticated, hadn't traveled much. It was just like a big high school, absent the parents. Yeah. So it was a terrific place for me. I went to Northwestern. Okay. Alpha. Yeah. By that time, my father had been transferred up to Northwestern, Oklahoma. So of the choices I had, that was the one closest to where they were. Yeah. So I went to Northwestern, Oklahoma State University, and played football and basketball.
Oh, wow. I'm sure that Mom and Dad were thrilled that you had gotten a scholarship to go to higher education.
Well, yes, because their budget was modest, and they were my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad had a pretty modest job, and so it was really important to get that scholarship. Yeah.
One of the things, and I probably said this many times on the podcast, is that the lifelong friends that you build from team environments, right? Yes. From that basketball team or that football team, you've got friends and you've got memories from 60 years ago, right? Of all these friends that you've had. Like, that's incredible.
those two guys that helped unload that van when I was a freshman, I talked to last week.
Yeah.
One lives in Sulphur, Oklahoma. The other one, Wichita, Kansas, and we talk frequently.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's the one thing that I kind of, you want every parent to get their kid into sports, right? Because of that, you're kind of forced to play together early on, and then you build these friendships, and like I said, you might find 2 or 3 that become lifelong friends, which
exactly
that is special. So you go to Alva, you're playing in Northwestern Oklahoma State. What was the degree choice at that time?
I majored in business, minored in, you'll be interested in journalism and speech.
Okay.
I did that because I don't know exactly how the idea got into my mind early in my life, but I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. And so I was taking courses that I thought would prepare me for law school. And Northwestern was really great to me. I loved the school and made a lot of friends, and that's where I met my wife.
Oh, you met Brenda in Alva?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about that day then. How'd you meet her?
Well, in those days, if you had a football scholarship, you had some kind of a job, and my job was to help clean the head football coach's office, which was not a rigorous job.
Right, yeah, could have been a lot worse.
So he taught a class called First Aid, which was an elective, and my wife was a year younger than me, and I was asked, by that time I was the quarterback on the football team, I was asked to participate in orientation, so I go to orientation, and I see this freshman girl in the crowd that I thought was about the cutest girl I'd ever seen, had an unusual voice, very unique personality, and so when I saw that she was in a class of mine, I fixed the seating chart so I would be sitting by her. And we've now been married 63 years.
Wow. That's awesome. It was easier back then to fix the seating chart as it is now.
Well, the coach was the teacher, so he permitted me to do that.
That's great. That's so good. I'd love to get her story on that as well, on her side of the story.
Yeah, she can tell it in a very unique way.
Yeah. So you're going through university, you're playing football, you're playing basketball. You say you want to become a lawyer. So after that, then do you apply to law school after you graduate from Alva?
Yes, Brenda and I got married the summer before my senior year and her junior year at Northwestern, and I applied for law school, and so finished up at Northwestern, got admitted to law school, and we moved to Norman.
Okay.
And went to law school at the University of Oklahoma.
Yeah, and like I said, that was kind of your dream at the time, was to become a lawyer.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Why did you want to become a lawyer? Was there anyone growing up that you kind of looked up to that was a lawyer, or was it just kind of, I want to be involved and I want to? There
was someone that I looked up to and was a good friend of my father's. He lived when I was a child in Stigler, and he had a really horrible thing happen to him, a war veteran that had PST that came back from the Second World War, kind of went on a shooting rampage in our town, and he shot this lawyer, and he spent the rest of his life paralyzed from the waist down, but he had such a great attitude. But my dad kept saying to me, see, if you're a lawyer, you can continue to earn a living. You can continue to have a life, even if you have something really tragic happen in your life. But all of it with my parents was about, you got to get ready to make a living.
Yeah.
Because that's what they knew. I mean, they knew times could get hard, banks could fail. So it wasn't, let's serve. It wasn't, let's just do something that you really like to do. It was, you got to get an education so you can make a living.
Yeah. So was it a tough conversation for them to, when you graduate, to say, actually, I'm going to go to law school for another few years instead of going into work? Because you could have gone to work at that point.
Yes, I definitely could have gone to work, but they were 100% on board.
Good.
They were not able to help us much in terms of finances, but Brenda and I both worked when we got to Norman. She finished her schooling. We got a small loan. At the time, it seemed tremendous. We borrowed $800, but tuition was lower, and she got a job working for the university architect, and I got a job working for the district judge.
Yeah.
So I was a bailiff for him. So we both worked, and we didn't have many obligations, and we didn't start our family until after I got out of law school. So it was a Spartan existence, but at the time we didn't know any better.
Yeah, and also there's so many great memories, I'm sure, from those times.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like you said, it's just you two, no kids. You go to work and you have school, but you also have some time to yourselves, and
that's exactly right.
Great memories. So, do you realize at that point then, clearly, you go on to OU law and you get there, and from people I've spoken to, seems like the first year in law school is the hardest year to get through.
It is. It's and I think even harder in my day, because I did not have to pass the LSAT, the law school exam that you have to pass today, and so the process to eliminate people who were not going to make it was in the classroom there. Yeah. So it was about, when I started, there were 200 people in our class, and we knew that only about 100 would graduate. It's different today because they have the testing and they know whether or not you have the aptitude. And so this emphasis is more on everybody's going to succeed more than it is on half of you are going to fail.
Yeah.
So it's kind of scary.
Right. Yeah, and you don't stick at it if you don't love doing what you do, right? So clearly there was a passion there, and you had a passion for the law and becoming a lawyer. When did you realize what kind of subject of law you wanted to go into, and what do you want to specialize in?
Well, I do want to say this. Again, my wife and I were from modest means in a rural setting, and I wasn't thinking about going to New York to practice law. I was thinking about, I wanted to go to an Oklahoma County seat town and open a law practice and raise my family, much like I'd been raised. And so my expectation at the time was that I would do that. And so when I graduated, I got an offer to come back to Alva, where Northwestern is, because there was a lawyer there that had known me at Northwestern. So we got offered a job, and we moved straight back to Alva, and where I practiced law for a few years. Oh,
wow. That's really nice to have those connections, right? To have those friends, and they've known you for being in college for 4 years. And then, like I said, he says, come on back. And you're obviously familiar with Alva because you spent so much time there and knew a lot of people.
Yeah, and we knew a lot of people. And in a small town law practice, it's, you have to build it over time. And it's a completely different thing than in a metropolitan area, I think.
Sure. So at this point then, is this when you kind of think, hey, we're settled now, we should start having a family?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, our first son, Mark, was born in September of 1963, and that I graduated from law school in May of 63, passed the bar in June of 63, and he was born in September. So it was a big year for us.
Big year, yeah.
Big year.
Yeah.
But I remember wondering what I was going to do if I didn't pass the bar.
Right.
Because the job depended on it.
It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure to have.
And baby on the way. Yeah. I can't remember feeling much more pressure than that.
Yes. Yeah, I've got to pass this test because not only does my career, my career is there if I pass the test, but also I've got to put food on the table and feed a baby that's coming in
exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. So back in Alva, you've got a job, you have a small family at this time. I mean, it's 1963. Like, take us there. I mean, what is time like? What was I guess your plan as well? Did you plan to stay in Alva, or did you think I'm going to go on and do bigger, better things?
Again, I'll emphasize, I was a lot less sophisticated than you were when you got out of college. And I was only thinking of getting a law practice started there. We immersed ourselves in the community. We had 3 sons that were all born there and fairly short order. Within about a 6-year span, we had three sons, and they were all in school in rural America, and Alva as well has really changed over the ensuing decades. But it was really alive, and there was a university there, and it was kind of central to a lot of things we like to do. And at least at the time, my wife and I thought it was a great place to raise a family. They could walk to school from where we lived. They all three went to the same school, and had a pretty good life that we enjoyed.
So one thing you mentioned there is being involved in the community. That's something that you're extremely well known for to this day. Where does that come from? Is that from mom and dad, or is that from something that you could just picked up that we need to be involved?
Well, I think that my mom and dad were involved in the community, but I think I learned it more at the university.
Yeah.
I think the educational process, and particularly at the law school, where there's a lot of emphasis put on not only serve your clients, but there was a need for pro bono work and to serve others. And then by this time, my wife and I had gotten really active in the church, making sure our kids were getting to church. And so I think a lot of lessons learned through our faith led us to believe that getting involved and trying to serve was a great way to live.
Yeah. Was your faith-based and faith upbringing from mom and dad as well? Did you go to church with mom and dad a lot?
Yes, they were very active in the church, in the small church where we grew up. Yeah. But at the time Brenda and I got married, she had a job as secretary for the Methodist minister in Alva. And it didn't take me long to become a Methodist because she had a job there.
Right.
So one of my first jobs after we got married, she was the church secretary and I was the assistant janitor the first year we were married. So we worked at the church and got involved at the church.
Okay, yeah. So take us from there then. When do we come to Oklahoma City and you get involved? I know you go work for Kerr McGee, right? Take us through those years and how do you eventually get to Oklahoma City?
By this time our kids were getting, our oldest son was in high school, the other two were in junior high, and Brenda was thinking that maybe there was more for us to do than was available to do, and she kept saying to me, you're going to be doing the same thing when you're 65 that you're doing when you're 35. I mean, it's going to be the same people, the same stuff, and I think you ought to try to see what else is out there for you. And she's always been a person that wanted to look over the next hilltop and see what was there. So, just kind of unexpectedly, I got a call from a Supreme Court justice in Oklahoma who was from our area. And he said, and Oklahoma during the 60s had gone through some really rough times with the Oklahoma Supreme Court. There had been a scandal. And so they had instituted a new court system, and they had created a position called Administrative Director of the Courts. So a justice named Pat Irwin from Western Oklahoma called me and said, why don't you come down here and interview for this job? We think you might be a good person to do this. So I came down, and they kind of arranged a special time because I was in court and had some detail problems. But anyway, interviewed for the job, came home. I said, Brenda, I feel so great. I made a step out toward trying to do this. Not a chance on earth I'm going to get this job, because most of the questions they asked me, I don't think I answered the way they wanted. Did I know a lot of legislators? No. Was I familiar with how we might computerize the courts? No. And so I thought I was not the person that was. And then at about 6:30 the next morning, Pat Irwin called me and said, we've decided to hire you. Can you be here next Monday? And it was a life-changing event because I was in the middle of a law practice and had lots of other things going on, lots of obligations to clients. And I said, well, gee, he said, when can you be here? And I said, well, this is December. I said, 1st of July? And he said, no, we're having the Bar Association meeting here next week in Oklahoma City. We'd like to introduce you. And anyway, they were very nice to let me finish up my stuff. Took the job, loved it, but it was pretty evident pretty quickly that if I was going to send 3 kids to college, I wasn't going to do it as a state employee, as my dad had been most all of his life.
Yeah. And
so during that time, I got a call from another college colleague from law school. Actually, 2 of them called me from Kerr McGee and said, it looks like Silkwood's coming back for a new trial. Would you be interested in coming over here to head up the litigation team for the defense of that case? And at that time, although I know that precedes you a long time, they'd already made a movie about it, and it was, to my way of thinking, one of the significant legal things that went on in my lifetime. So, talked about it. It had never been my desire to work as a corporate attorney, but the opportunity seemed great, and the money was better. Mm-hmm. So Brenda and I said, yeah. So we stayed here in Oklahoma City. I went to work at Kerr McGee and kind of started working my way up through the chairs from there. Yeah.
And another exciting time, you mentioned, the boys are getting ready to go to college.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, the very first year we moved to Oklahoma City, Mark started at the University of Oklahoma, and Randy was going to be a freshman and at Edmond Memorial at the time, and Lance was a 7th grader.
Yeah.
So we were all in here for the big adventure of the big city.
That's great. And one of the things I know a little bit of as well is not only did you, obviously, like you said, you played high school football and basketball and you're a quarterback, but your sons are pretty athletic as well, right?
Yes.
Randy's in the Hall of Fame somewhere.
He is. Right? Randy. Mark, our oldest, played football and basketball and went to the state tournament and was a good athlete. Randy seemed to be, of our 3, the most natural. He was able to play as a child. He was generally the best one in his class. And by the time he got to high school, we got down here, he became a state champion in the 800 meter, played football. But he was a good athlete, and so was Lance. Lance was really good in elementary school, but he was never. He was never the intense competitor that Randy probably was. But I will tell you this one great story about Lance. He was a senior at Heritage Hall. They had his friend Brent Johnson was an outstanding track guy, and they were in the state meet, and Lance had pulled a muscle or something, but he talked the coach into letting him run the anchor leg on the relay team, the 2-mile relay team, and 3,200 meters, I guess it is. And anyway, Brent got him a big lead. The other 2 guys held on, and Lance held on and won it by an eyelash was maybe the most thrilling thing I ever saw in sports. Because he was having to drag his leg around, but I knew that he had a lot of grit. Because he held on to win it. They won the state championship for Heritage Hall, and it was fun.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's great. And those people who know Lance that are listening to this are probably going to be surprised when they hear that story, which is what I love. And Lance is probably listening, and he knows exactly, the funny stories that we have. And I'm sure there's more. He told me when Randy was being inducted into his high school Hall of Fame, right? He said he didn't tell anybody, he just went down there on his own.
That's true. Yes, that's true.
Oh, which is brilliant. Because the one thing I think a lot of people know of your family is that if someone's winning something, the entire family is there to support, right? Like you're all there.
No doubt about it.
Whether it's the grandkids or a son or whatever it is, like it's something really cool to see and to follow you guys. But moving forward then, when is it that you get the opportunity to go back to Alva to become a president of the university?
Well, worked at Kerr McGee for 15 years or more, and kind of worked my way up out of the law department into management and through the chairs, and became vice chairman of the company, and loved Kerr McGee. It was a life-changing experience for Brenda and me. We responsible for an office in Washington, D.C. up there once a month. We had to buy insurance from Lloyd's of London, went there once a year. So it was just for people with our background, it was a significant and life-changing opportunity that really did transform our lives. And we'll always be grateful. The chairman of Kerr McGee who hired me was a fellow named Frank McPherson. Coincidentally, I still do a Bible study with him once a week. He'll be 90 next year, and just one of the finest men I've ever known. But our time at Kerr McGee was really great. So by this time, I was going to be 62 years old in the year 2000, and decided that I'd like to retire. I was going to be in a position to retire, and so decided and announced that would be my last year at Kerr McGee. And at that time, a longtime president at Northwestern retired, and I was asked to serve on the selection committee as one of the alums. Well, I got to the first meeting, and some of my friends that I've known over the years said, "Well, gee, if you're retiring, why don't you apply for that job?" And what I guess would be significant about this, that I don't want to get too what do I want to say, corny about it, but when I knew I was retiring at Kerr McGee and I was 62 and I was feeling great, although this is probably not evident to you, I've always been kind of a controlled guy. I like to be in charge of what's going to happen to me and my family, and so I'm always interested. So for the first time in my life, I said, "Lord, whatever's out there for me, just show me what it is. I feel good. I want to do something, and if it's a greeter at Walmart, if it's coaching Little League baseball, whatever is out there for me, show me what it is, and I'm open to do whatever there is to do." Because I was going to be fortunate enough to have a retirement. So anyway, I got a call, met with some friends in Alva. They submitted my name. I went to the interview. Everybody else was qualified. I was not qualified. I of course, did not have a degree in education. I'd never been involved in university administration. And I think if it had been any other university on earth, they wouldn't have I'd not gotten past the search firm. I mean, I wouldn't have had the credentials, So anyway, I got into the interview, and the interview was here in Oklahoma City, and I was driving back to work at Kerr McGee, and they called me and said, "You've got the job." And it was just, to me, it was a God thing, because it was something I'd never thought about doing. In my day, people who were presidents of universities had a PhD, or at a minimum, they would have had a Doctor of Education degree. And so my degree was a Juris Doctorate, but hardly a preparation for to be president of the university. However, that had happened in our state. David Boren, who had the same Juris Doctorate degree, was president at OU. And so there were others, including Glenn Johnson, who became chancellor. He was the president at Southeastern. So it wasn't unheard of in those days, although it was rare. So Brenda and I thought about it, and she wasn't as excited about moving back to Alva. By this time, after they've seen Paris, it's hard to take them back to the farm. But as she always did, she just packed right up. We moved back, and she spent her time just turning things over out there. She redid one of the interesting stories was she decided that we needed to redo the president's home. And to do that, we had to move out.
Right.
So we moved into the girls' dormitory, which, as I might say, fulfilled a lifetime desire on my part. But they had a suite of rooms there reserved for handicapped students that were unoccupied. And so Brenda and I moved into the girls' dorm, and we lived there until the spring, and when they got the work done on the president's house. So we moved into the president's house. But she was really active in hosting a lot of events, and of course, we knew Alvin, we knew the people there, and we were able to get a lot of people engaged in helping the university, and we really loved it.
Yeah. Well, it's an exciting time, right? You're kind of returning to a home, right? You're returning to a place where you've grown so much. You have so many stories from, for whether it's college, having Mark, first child out there, or, just so many, so many family memories.
Yes.
It's really cool to go full circle and come back. And I believe, if the stats are still right, you're the only former student to become a president.
I was the first one. They now have one.
Okay, they do.
They now have another one.
Okay.
Yeah, their president now was a Northwestern graduate. Yes, but that was the kind of the historical significance of being the first graduate to ever become president was really interesting and inspiring to me. So I was glad to get to do it.
Yeah, and even though, like you said, you didn't really know much about education, you knew business, and being, 15 plus years or 10, 15 plus years at Kerr McGee, becoming vice chairman, clearly you're good at what you do. Well,
and we knew the people, and in those regional universities, the university is generally the biggest enterprise in town. So you gotta work in the Chamber of Commerce, and you gotta help them with everything that's going on in the city. They want to make sure the highways are good. You're just kind of it's expected to be a community leader if you're going to have that job, and I like that. So it all worked out great.
And like I said, you're supposed to retire, and then you go into, I'm going to be the president of a university, and then you're at events, right? You're not just running things, but you're at football games, you're at basketball games. You have a big schedule.
And the great thing for me was I love that stuff.
Yeah.
I loved going to the football games. More than any other thing, I loved getting to engage with the students. I love being a part of it. It's not like having your own kids play, but it's a lot like it.
Yeah.
It's a lot like it.
Yeah. So then being in Alva, that, I guess, job kind of puts you on the map for whenever Oklahoma City, because most people know you as former president of Oklahoma City University as well. So how does that transition?
Well, I don't want to belabor this. It was a God thing.
Yeah.
But I was at Northwestern, and I got a call from a fellow I knew here named Bill Shadid. He was chairman of the board of Oklahoma City University Board of Trustees, and he said, when are you going to be in town, and could you come by my office? And so I went by his office, and there was an all-star cast there. These are people that are even older than me, but the bishop of the Methodist Church was there. Herman Minders was there. One of my favorite people, Ray Ackerman, was there from Ackerman McQueen. Roy Chandler. And so I walked into this room, and these are all people I know, and most importantly, Robert S. Kerr Jr., who was on the board at Kerr McGee and who I knew well. And they were all on the board of trustees at Oklahoma City University. And I walked in, and they said, "We've gotten word that our president is leaving, and are you liking what you're doing?" And I said, and particularly Bob Kerr knew me because we'd been through a lot together at Kerr McGee. And I said, "Yeah, I think I like it better than anything I've ever done. I really like this, and so does Brenda." And so I go back home, go back to Alvin, and a call comes and says, "We want you to come to OCU." And Brenda says, "Oh my gosh, Tom, we haven't been here at Northwestern. We thought we'd stay 5 years, and and so forth."
Yeah.
And so it was not an easy decision.
Right.
So I came to see the bishop of the Methodist Church here, a guy at that time named Bruce Blake, and said, I don't want to do, this is a Methodist university. And I said, we're Methodist, and so that's an attraction to me, but I don't want to do this if you don't feel good about it. I mean, some of the ministers in the past some of the presidents have been ministers, and most all of them have had PhDs, and I'm going to be a non-traditional guy, and I don't want to do this, even if the rest of them want me to, if you don't feel good about it. And he said, during the history of universities, they need different people for different times. And he said, we're going through some tough financial times. We need to raise some money. We need to get connected to the business community in Oklahoma City. And we're thinking you're the guy that can do that. And he said, I'll do the preaching, and so anyway, we moved back.
Yeah.
And it was for us love at first sight. We loved everything about the university, including the Methodist affiliation. The performing arts just were so fantastic that it was hard to believe Brenda and I were there. I mean, these kids just came from all over the country, actually all over the world, and they were great. We had good sports programs, and we had a law school, and they'd been hoping for several years to get accredited by the AALS, the American Association of Law Schools, and that seemed like a doable goal, which I might say we did get that done. So it was kind of a star-crossed path, and loved it better than anything I've ever done.
Yeah. So then for the next 9 years, you go on basically a fundraising mission, right? And to improve the school, raise money.
Yes.
And I know one of the people you just mentioned, as in Herman Minders, has given a lot of money to OCU, and him and his wife are a huge part of that as well. And
they were
former Oklahoma Hall of Famer as well.
There were. It was fortuitous that there were people who were interested in the university that had means. Herman, I have said publicly 100 times, is the most generous man I've ever met, and he's also a tough-minded businessman. I mean, he didn't find his money laying on the street. He earned it. He had a great business, and he taught me a lot about generosity and an interest in helping the next generation. And yes, he gave us probably $35 million while Brenda and I were there, the bulk of which was to build the Minder School of Business. But he also helped the nursing school, which was named for LaDonna's family, the Kramer School of Nursing. And he was the most interesting guy because he would go into a restaurant, and the waiter would come over and he'd say, "Are you in college?" "No, I'd kind of like to go, but I don't have the money." And Herman said, "Well, if you'll come to OCU to business school, I'll pay for it." I mean, I just can't even tell you how many people whose lives he affected, and most of that unknown. I mean, everybody knows about the fantastic business school.
Yeah.
And then the second person was Wanda Bass. I don't want to overstay my time here with you.
Oh, we got time. You're good. We got plenty
Wanda
of time.
Bass also, she taught me more than anyone I've ever known the joy of giving.
Yeah.
She was a woman whose husband had, and with her help, had created a big bank in McAlester, Oklahoma, and they had a huge bank and lots of investments and stuff. And her daughter came to OCU before I came, and she was an instrumentalist. She's an organist. So the first time I met Mrs. Bass, she came in and said, "I would like to make OCU an all Steinway school. And I said, well, I don't know what that means. And I don't know what it takes.
Right.
So I said, but the dean of our music school does, Mark Parker. So I said, well, then why don't we just go to the Steinway and Company in New York and let's see what that means. So we went up there, and basically it said, it turns out we'd have to have 172 pianos. We had lots of people majoring in music. And it turns out that is the biggest purchase and sale in the history of the Steinway Company. So I come back and I say, Wanda, it's going to cost $4 million, and then they'll have to be maintained. And she said, well, let's just do that. So we did. So we went up there and had a big affair in New York, and they hung a Steinway piano in the 21 Club with Wanda Bass's name on it, and that was the beginning of something really fantastic, because then she said, well, gee, this is, we got these old buildings, and what are we going to do about that? So I'll fast forward to say it was not an easy process. Sure. But she gave us the bulk of the money to build the Wanda Bass School of Music, which cost more than $30 million as well.
Wow.
But we had a lot of other people help.
Yeah.
I mean, we went out and asked, she would match what other people gave. Yeah. But before we did that, I drove to McAllister and met with her two sons. And I said, I have appreciated getting to know your mother, and I really appreciate what she's done on the Steinway and Sons. She wants to give us $20 million or $25 million to build a new music school. And I'd like to know that you all feel okay about that. I don't know enough about your family business, but I do know that your mom's about 80 years old, and before we move into this, I'd sure like to know that you all approve of it and think it's okay, and we're not taking your money.
Your future inheritance, yeah.
And so they told me several stories about her generosity, and also verified that they were well provided for. Yeah. And they said, this is just her. She's just the most generous person you've ever met in your life, and we're happy for her to do it. So and those two particularly, Ann Lacey was a big donor, gave us $12.5 million. And so we had a lot of people that helped. It was a combination, I think, of people having some confidence in the university, but also having the means to do it. And they all appeared in a relatively short period of time.
That's amazing to have that first-hand experience of the joy of giving.
Oh,
right?
Yes. She was just so happy. Yeah. I mean, I just can't express it. She and my wife got along beautifully, and she was like Herman. Yeah. It really gave her joy to help others. Yeah. And she was just a wonderful person.
Yeah. I heard a story about Herman that he didn't really care for his name to be on the building. He just, he's like, don't worry about it. And that someone had to convince him to put his name on the building, not for him, but for his family, that future generations would see what he'd done.
That's true. Right. He was not a person who was looking for personal what shall I say, aggrandizement. Yeah. He was just, but I said, Herman, from where I'm sitting, you're the first domino to fall. Yeah. And if people believe that you are willing to invest $30 million here, I feel good about going to other people and asking them to give us $500,000 for a new this. I feel great about building a new dormitory. I feel great about us getting a new dance school. The Inasmuch Foundation, I feel like we could go to them and ask them to help us build a new dance school. But part of that is because if they believe that you, a businessman, believes in what's going on here enough to invest that much money in it, that's worth it all. And that's why I want your name on the building, because I want people to know you believe in what we're doing.
Yeah. And I mean, clearly it's worked, because he's obviously, gone on to do great things, but the university is thriving and doing great things too.
He certainly OCU is not the only good thing he's done. He's helped a lot of other people, a lot of other places. I could regale you with stories of things I know for sure he's done, but he absolutely, this wasn't the only thing. But I viewed Herman's contribution not only as generosity, but also as the good housekeeping seal of approval, that there's something really good going on here, and I'm willing to invest in it.
Yeah. So then, you're at OCU for 9 years, from 2001 to 2010. Do you think I've had enough? I'm going to retire now. I'm, in my 70s. Like, I should probably try and retire again. And Brenda's thinking we should go do different things.
Well, a little different than that.
Okay.
One of the OCU had a president who suffered some serious health issues before I got there, and so I assured them when I came and agreed to put it in my contract that I take a physical every year. Yeah. And I said, if I don't feel, if my health isn't good, I'm not just looking for a job. If my health isn't good, you'll need to get somebody else. Yeah. So in 2000, at the end of 2004, beginning of 2005, I was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, wow.
And so I had some surgery and everything seemed to be okay. Then the years are rolling together for me, but I'm going to say in 2009, I had a recurrence of cancer. And I had to go down to MD Anderson and take treatments for a couple of months. And my future looked uncertain.
Sure.
And so, true to what I told them, I said, this is not a part-time job, and this is not a job you can do if you don't feel well, because we lived on campus. I mean, people were knocking on the door saying, Mrs. McDaniel, the soccer game started, and you're not out there. Where are you? So it was a I don't want to say 24/7 job, but it practically was. Mm-hmm. And so Brenda and I talked it over and decided, gee, if your health is not going to be good, well, so here we are. So in 2009, I told them that I'd like to leave July the 1st of 2010. Mm-hmm. And they asked me if I would stay for 1 year with the new president and be chancellor. And it turned out that so I did. So I stayed an extra year after Robert Henry came as president, and then left. But I also think that from some of the reading I've done about university presidents, I kind of think about 10 years is enough. It's someone has described it as a battleship that's to turn. Everybody ought to have 5 years to kind of get it going in the right direction. And then if you do a great job, maybe another 5. But after that, new ideas, new energy, is good. So Brenda and I felt like the combination of my health and the combination of it's time for somebody else to look at this and see what they can do. Yeah. So we left in good spirits, feeling great. University treated us great. Was glad to see Robert Henry come. And so it was a smooth transition. Yeah.
So do you, at this time then, do you have the treatment, everything back on track, we're okay? What are people coming to you saying, hey, I know you're not going to do this, you're not going to be president anymore. How about we do this instead? Are people coming to you, friends of yours coming to you with other board opportunities, obligations, things that they'd like to get you involved in?
Yes, I didn't have any plans except to stay that extra year. Mm-hmm. And during that year, Bill Durrett and Bill Cameron, the Cameron family owns American Fidelity, and Bill Durrett's the senior chairman there. Contacted me and said, we've started this foundation, and we're looking for someone to run this foundation and do community relations, and would you be interested in doing it? And at the time, I said, I don't think so. I think I'm ready to hang it up. And, but then a few months passed and they hadn't hired anybody. Yeah. So they called me back and said, well, has the circumstance changed? And I said, yeah, I think it has. I think I'd like to do that. Yeah. So I went to work at American Fidelity thinking that was for a couple of years, and I've now finished 10.
You're still there.
I went there in 2011, so 2022, 11 years, 1st of September, and I really like it. It's one of the things that I had undertaken to do at the end of my time at OCU. I'd agreed with the mayor and city council that I would chair the MAPS 3 initiative, the Citizens Advisory Board. And maybe when I agreed to do that, I didn't know how long it would take, but here we are. That was in 2010, and so I'm still doing that. But one of the things about working at American Fidelity, they wanted me to do that as part of their community relations. So I spent a fair amount of time working on the MAPS development for the Chamber of Commerce and for the community.
Yeah, and over the last 10 years, I've been here since August 2011. So over this period, the city, since I've been here, has really grown. And obviously, you've been at the front of that. You've been in the thick of it, very involved with just everything that's going on. And now we have these incredible districts and the park that's opening up, and it's still growing. We have the convention center. It must be really cool to have seen, concrete bare parking lots just become this beautiful park and this scene, but not just there, all over the city as well.
It really has. I'd have to say it's the most rewarding volunteer job I've ever had. I didn't know much about city business, and I have come to appreciate what a fantastic staff they have and what a big business it is, and what a great job our mayors have done with cities all over the country suffering all kinds of problems. And we definitely have problems, but we've been able to avert it by investing in ourselves. By this MAPS 3 1 cent sales tax has kept us going now into the 4th iteration. But senior wellness centers, the river, which is another story in and of itself. What Mike Knopf and others have done there has been almost mind-boggling.
It's incredible. And we just had the Red Bull Rapids there. Yes. And who would have thought that there's a river that close to downtown Oklahoma City and an event space and beautiful buildings that can host, conference for rowing every year and all these other incredible water sports. When you think of Oklahoma City, you don't think of water sports, right? So it's special.
Well, I mentioned earlier one of the guys that was in the room when I came to OCU was a guy in my named Ray Ackerman. Yeah. And there's a book been written about his life called Old Man River. Yeah. But he brought Mike Knopf to my office at OCU and said, we ought to start a rowing program here. Yeah. And we did. And Mike just has taken that vision exponentially beyond what anybody could have possibly thought, certainly beyond what I would have known. Right. But he started as rowing coach at OCU.
Yeah, because he was a lawyer too, right? Wasn't he?
He is a lawyer.
He is a lawyer too, right? He worked for the DA.
But he had this big dream. Yeah. And the city bought into it. He sold it as something that would be unique in Oklahoma City. Yeah. So today, when you think about the world we live in, and because of the Ukraine, they cancel the world championships in paddle sports in Russia, and they turned to Oklahoma City as the venue for the world championships in canoe and kayaking. I mean, it's just mind-boggling for someone like me who's grown up here and could never have dreamed such a thing could happen, but here it is.
Yeah, because it was not a place you wanted to go, I'm sure, right? Back in the day. It was
right, and the river was dry. I mean, it took effort by the city to put water in the river, and then Ray worked for 25 years getting the name of the river changed to the Oklahoma River. It was the North Canadian River.
Okay.
And he saw no sense in that. So anyway, it was really unusual.
Yeah. So finishing up then, you've been around some incredible characters. You know, you mentioned Wanda Bass, Herman Minders, Ray Ackerman, all these people, you know, have just kind of poured into you, but also you've poured into them, and collectively you guys have poured into the community. What do you attribute kind of their success, your success to in moving the community forward? Like, is there one? I mean, it's probably hard to put one thing on it, but is there anything that stands out?
Well, I guess this. I learned something from football that's really helped me a lot through life, and that is, I got to go to college to play football because I was the best player in a small high school team. I wasn't in college very long before I knew I would never again be the best player on any team I was ever on. There were guys there that were bigger, stronger, faster, but what I did learn was that I could be a great teammate. And I think more than any other thing, that has been kind of something that always keeps me going. I may not be able to do everything well, but what I can do is to try to be a great teammate, try to encourage those that I'm brought into contact with. And I think it helps you in your marriage. I think it helps you being a parent. I think it helps you in your work. And I certainly think it helps you in your volunteerism. So my goal is to be a great teammate. And I've had all these fantastic people whose lives have crossed mine, like Herman and Wanda and Ray Ackerman and the bishops of the church and others that have given me opportunities that I would never have thought of, when I was a youngster. And so it's been a great opportunity.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming down. It's, I know you're still a busy man, at 84 years old, you've got a lot going on. And like we said before we started recording, you probably didn't think you'd be this busy at 84 years old. But thank you so much for coming down. I really appreciate everything you and Brenda and your 3 sons have done for this city. The legacy will live on long after everyone's, dusting in the ground. And that's just something that is really special, that the McDaniel name is known as something that we give back, and we give generously, and it's through education or just doing what we do, and that's something that I have seen since I've been here, since I first met you at the golf club. I kind of knew of just the name and what that means to Oklahoma City and Oklahoma in general. So thank you on behalf of everyone listening, and for people listening, we'll catch you next episode. Cheers. Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And finally, our third sponsor for today, the Oklahoma 988 Mental Health Lifeline. 988 is the direct 3-digit lifeline that connects you with the trained behavioral health professionals that can get all Oklahomans the help that they need. Learn more by visiting 988oklahoma.com. It's 988oklahoma.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.